Welcome everybody, welcome to this JEDI disruption. These are direct, no-nonsense conversations with leaders on technology, science and innovation. You are more and more to watch us either live, like right now on LinkedIn. You can follow us on our podcast and also our Twitter account at EuroJEDI. So I'm André Lezucco-Pietri, I'm the director of JEDI, which is the European Initiative for Disruptive Innovation. We are launching technology grand challenges on the greatest societal issues we are facing in healthcare and environment and in digital. And so we are absolutely delighted today to have a very important person in the French government construct, which is Thomas Courbe. He's the Director General for Enterprises, which is probably one of the most important posts at the French Ministry of Finance. Without further ado, let me introduce him. He's spearheading the efforts of the French government on enterprises, on the current rescue plan for the economy, and also on innovation, two topics we're going to discuss with him. So thank you, Thomas, to be with us.
Well, André, thank you very much for your invitation. I'm very glad to be with you.
So first, tell us about the French situation, and tell us, obviously we are facing an extremely hard crisis. Tell us about the recovery plans. I don't know if you want to call them rescue plans or recovery plans. I think you just announced something today, but tell us about the strategy and the vision from the French side.
Yes, as you said, and hello everyone, I'm very glad to be with you this afternoon. As you said, André, we have been struck, and the economy has been struck by a terrible crisis, and the government's answer has been in maybe three times. First, as emergency measures were taken to help as many companies cope with the crisis, and we have put in place huge financings just to let companies face the crisis, and also probably the world's most performing support for companies to keep their employees, and this has been recognized as a major element to help companies keep their employees in these very difficult times. So these were the emergency measures that were taken in the very first days of the crisis. Now we are in the period where we are launching sectoral plans, which are also probably emergency plans for the sectors that have been the most badly hit by the crisis. As you may have seen, we have announced a plan on tourism a few weeks ago, which has been obviously very passed very difficult phase. The automotive sector plan has been announced by the president a few days ago, and we should announce a plan for aeronautics sector and maybe another one in the coming weeks. So we are here focusing in these days on the sectors that are that need the most public support, and then we will have the full-fledged recovery plan probably in the end of the summer. We are working on it, and for this we need a bit more time to have measures that will not anymore be emergency measures, but more structural measures for the next few years to support the economy.
Very clear, thank you. Can you tell us more broadly, what do you think this crisis will change in terms of the role of the state? Because obviously we saw that compared to 2008, the states were much faster to intervene. Tell us, I mean, your vision. Is this just a punctual intervention, or will that change structurally the way the state is acting on the economy?
Yes, I think, well, there are a lot of lessons to be learned from this crisis, but I think one of them is that we have to reinforce our economic sovereignty. And I think it is a major lesson learned. And obviously, economic sovereignty will be reached through state action, obviously from all parties, companies, people, action, but also from state action. And we feel there is a consensus on the fact that in the coming years, the state will have, obviously, as we mentioned, to act in support of the economy in these hard times, but also to have a more far-seeing view on how to improve our sovereignty, our capacity to master key technologies and technology that answer key societal challenges. Some of whom you mentioned, digital transition, green transition, digital, to say a few. And this, we probably have to think at national level, at European level also. We have to think in a new fashion to see how we can improve this sovereignty. Obviously, we will keep a globalized economy, globalized companies, but we have in some sectors some key elements of value chains that answer specific needs of our societies. We have to be much more resilient than we were during this crisis, and we have to take quick action to increase this resilience. Obviously, health is the natural sector where this resilience has to be improved. But we think the crisis has shown also other economic sectors where this resilience had to be improved, such as agro-food industry, which has been seen as a key element of finally country's sovereignty. Obviously, data, as it's not new, but the crisis has confirmed that we need to have a much higher sovereignty in terms of data, digital tools, digital services. So this is another key element, probably.
If I push you a little bit on that topic, I mean, what exactly do you mean with technological sovereignty? I mean, how will you assess? You talked about specific parts of the value chain. How will you assess that? Who will assess that? Does it mean the companies need to remain in control? Does it mean we need to have double sourcing? Does it mean that we need to have our own technologies? Could you give us some more precise examples, because everybody's talking about that.
Yes.
And some to defend some very conservative, relatively old-fashioned strategies, or others to defend existing incumbent, not necessarily very performing players. What is your view on it?
Yeah. I think we have. I hope we have a more modern view of the concept than maybe it was used in the past. Maybe the first thing to say that this idea of sovereignty, reinforced sovereignty, will apply where societal challenges are involved, where also values are involved. And just to give a very recent example, this afternoon we were with Ministers Le Maire and Altmaier for the launch of Gaia X, and Gaia X, I think, is a very good example of usual technologies, which are cloud technology. Yes, right. That are cloud services that are used in a widespread basis. But what we change here is that we define the values that these technology should respect, and we define a new project where private companies will offer these cloud services, but respecting the values we will have set together, and the values that were presented this afternoon. And I don't want to enter into too many details, but I think it's a good example of what sovereignty means, which is also defining the values you want the technology to respect. And obviously there is a notion that you mentioned of a form of independence, which is on some key element of a value chain. You may consider that you need some independence. You need some in terms of crisis, or in a more global approach, that you need to have at national level, at European level, a greater independence in terms of technology and production. And this is a bit new also to consider that in some cases to react to such crisis, you need also some more production at European or national level. Obviously, as you said, it cannot be a global approach. It has to be very specific to key elements of the value chains. I mentioned global value chains, health, agro, food. We also saw for semiconductors and power electronics were a key value chain. And in this, we have engaged with the private companies into this reflection on which elements of these value chains are really critical and which one we think engage our sovereignty in some cases, and more generally speaking, our resilience. During the crisis in the health sector, we have had very concrete examples, such as to take non very innovative product masks, protective masks. And as you may have seen, the president of the French Republic has asked us to build some form of independence on mass production. So this is maybe on a very simple element of the value chain. Obviously, it goes up to some medical devices that on which we consider we need a greater sovereignty, and up to drugs, vaccines, and this kind of reflection can be applied to the different value chains, and in this spirit of determining which elements of these chains should be reinforced. As you mentioned, the solutions are multifold. In some cases, for the most critical elements, we may consider that we need to have a greater national or European production. In other cases, double sourcing or strategic stocking can be also very relevant solutions.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. So we should expect more strategic thinking of the state on which are the
yes.
points on which you need to put the effort. And my team will hate me spoiling the idea, but on next week there will be World Ocean Day, because yes. That's going to be my next question: is do you think the environment, which was the big thing also for the Commission and also for the French government and the engagement of the president on that, will it be a winner or unfortunately a loser of this crisis? And the spoiling was just that we're going to announce a challenge on recycling masks, because yes. With all the masks we're using, we are ending up with a huge new source of plastics pollution. But yes. that will be announced next week. But tell us about your feeling on the environment.
Yeah, our feeling is very clear that it has to be a winner. And if you see all the actions we have taken since the beginning of the crisis, environment has been a key element. I was mentioning, for example, the automotive action plan, recovery plan, which was a huge plan, probably the biggest plan we ever implemented in France for the automobile industry. And
so 8 billion euro, right?
Yeah, and this plan has a very strong focus on environmental transition. There is a very big R&D effort that will be clearly focused on green automotive, and if you look at the plan in details, you see that there is, for example, a much stronger focus on green transition than on other technological challenges regarding automobile industry. For the aeronautic plan, as the minister has already mentioned, the environmental transition will be a key element also of all our support, of the commitments we will expect from the companies. And in the recovery plan, the structural recovery plan we are working on, we are considering including the work we did in the productive plan project before the crisis, and in particular all the work that was made around the key markets. There was a college of experts shared by Benoît Potier, who identified key markets for the future and that on which we want to focus, which are markets with a strong technological content. And if you look at these markets that we have selected and that we feel are still very consistent, there is a very strong focus also on environmental transition and all the technologies that have to be used for environmental transition. As you know, one of the earmarks of a form of sovereignty we engaged before the crisis was on batteries for electric vehicles, and this is clearly with a strong environmental transition focus. We want to work on hydrogen, for example, on solutions for the industry, which will be for environmental transition in the industry, recycling. All these technologies will be very much linked to the transition. So to say it in a nutshell, all this illustrate the fact that it is a key direction in our recovery plans and in our strategy for the next years.
I mean, we're very much looking forward how we will avoid probably the mistakes of the past, where sometimes there was a very much top-down approach, and sometimes the focus was on topics of the past. Is how do we make sure that this strategic thinking remains agile? So we are very obviously you can count on us to feed you with ideas. The time is flying by. We have only a few minutes left, but I wanted to ask you maybe one, even two questions. One is also linked to several of the comments from those who are listening to us. I mean, we are using LinkedIn Live. Everybody of us, if they didn't know Zoom, they know Zoom now. Zoom is now $60 billion. Clearly, the winners of this crisis are the technology giants. And obviously, this has been an acceleration for digitalization. That is the good thing in it. How do we make sure in France and in Europe that we can catch up on this digital world in which we are entering? And how do we actually combine being sovereign? And on the other side, I heard the report that France is one of the leading destinations in Europe. The openness to foreign acquisitions, because those who are most affected by the crisis are also the small companies, especially the tech companies. They are very vulnerable today. How we will remain open and sovereign? I mean, isn't that a paradox in itself?
Yes. Well, there are a lot of
probably
questions.
A tough question.
Yes. On your last question, it's clear that a lot of small companies, startups are fragile, and we have taken a lot of actions to try to consolidate them and also to protect them from predatory acquisitions. And we have been very vocal on the fact that we are ready to intervene when it is needed to protect some of our key companies. And we think it's very compatible with the fact that we keep openness. We are a very attractive country. Just to give a few one example, in the last years, we have reinforced a lot our investment control regulation. And this has been parallel to our increased ranking in terms of attractiveness. So there are 1,600 investment projects in France every year. Less than 100 are controlled, and the more we reinforce the control on a very limited number of companies, and the more we keep attracting new investments in larger numbers. As you've seen, we are ranking #1 in Europe now in terms of investment. So we think it's compatible, and the investors we discuss with understand that there are a very limited number of cases where sovereignty is concerned and control is needed. And in the large majority, opportunities for investment and free investment and openness. And I think you can have this balance. On after the crisis and digital technologies, there is two major challenges. One is how to help all our companies, from the smallest one to the biggest one, increase its digitalization. And obviously, the state wants to intervene more on small companies where there is huge amount of work to be done, to from the small shops to small industrial companies which need Industry 4.0, which needs new digital solutions. So there is, and I think in the recovery plan we will pledge for a strong emphasis on this aspect, digitalizing all our companies at a much greater rate than it was in the past. And then obviously you mentioned it, all the tech giants, how to support our startups growing. We have a lot of actions. Unfortunately, not enough time to detail them, but we have actions focused on growth of our startups and unicorns. And then the core technologies, digital technologies, are obviously a focus. As you know, we will continue our artificial intelligence strategy. We will continue to invest very strongly in digital technologies, blockchain, and all technologies on which we have action plans, and we want to complete them. For example, in the key markets in which we want to invest that I mentioned, there is digital health, and this is clearly some field where we want to invest. On artificial intelligence, we think our companies can be leading in onboard artificial intelligence. So systems of artificial intelligence embarked on devices. And on all these fields, we know we have to focus a lot of energy and financings to allow our companies to be at the right level in terms of technologies.
Thank you for this, especially these precise examples. So this is very enlightening. My very last question, and will be probably the most direct to you. Don't be worried, but I should ask that to you. I mean, you have been big spearheading a lot of initiatives on innovation. The Conseil de l'Innovation is now up and running. As you know, we represent several thousands of scientists and technologies in Europe, and we're pushing for European version of DARPA. DARPA and BARDA, you know, the health equivalent in the US, have been very much in the headlines, especially with the controversy on Sanofi and on vaccines. Tell us why. I mean, now that 62 years after the launch of DARPA, it has been so successful, and how come we have not been able in Europe to implement such a tool, which is both, you know, doing it for the common good, that not privatized, but on the other side, independent from, I would say, the more traditional administrative structures?
Yeah, well, as you know, in France, the Innovative Council is trying to put in place DARPA-like measures, and we have 4 great challenges that are ongoing, and we have met the challenges managers a few days ago to validate their work after 1 year of work. So I think in France, it's ongoing. We started it 1 year ago, so obviously we have not the experience of DARPA, but we have started it. And as we discussed, we want to see how we can work better with JEDI, between our Innovation Council and in initiatives such as JEDI. At the European level, we advocate with Germany for a European disruptive innovation agency. You know that Germany has put in place its own agency. We are working closely with them, and we want it to become a European initiative. This is clearly our objective. On BARDA, as you may have seen during the crisis, we have launched an initiative which is a BARDA-like initiative on all vaccines and drugs related to COVID. And so we have started an initiative that is very much inspired.
You're talking about reacting or care, or what is the name of this initiative that you mentioned?
Well, it's an initiative. It's a national initiative, aside from the European ones. It does not really have a name, but it's a 120 million euros dedicated, and there has been a request for proposals that was launched during the crisis, and we have had a lot of proposals and that are being scrutinized, and decisions will be made very soon.
Very good. Thomas Courbe, thank you so much to be our guest today. I mean, you see, you are probably the longest guest we ever had, but it was fascinating. So I did not want to interrupt. Thank you so much for your support. Thank you for your continued engagement, and good luck for all these plans in this very difficult time for our country. So again, thank you, and see you all for next JEDI Disruption.
Thank you. Goodbye, everyone.